everybody. Welcome back to the Fly Fishing Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Christian Bacasa. Today we have Matt Martin on the line. Matt is out of the Toronto area, actually a little bit further north. He runs Smooth River Guiding. He's been in the outdoor industry for years. He spends almost 230 days plus a year. I think this year he's going to try and break 230 days on the river guiding. You tie about 4,000 flies a year. So you're an active fly fisherman. And in today's episode, we're going to really dive into the subject of post-spawn pike, which we don't talk a lot about on the website, but it's an absolutely fantastic and fun species to go after. And then the last section of the show, we're going to talk about spot fishing fish in general. And we're going to use some examples that you use around town when you're spot fishing for smallmouth bass, in particular on like a flat style boat. But those are transferable to trout, flats fishing, etc. So I'm looking forward to this episode. We're going to have a lot to discuss, both anglers, old climbers, etc. So we're going to be back and forth, guys. Hang with us and let's have some fun this week. So Matt, tell us a little bit about where you're at, how you've been, etc.
Hey Christian, thanks. This is an awesome opportunity to speak with you and your listeners. We're in the middle of it right now. Middle of summer. I'm looking forward to a fall pike fishery, but right now we're just in bass days on the river, out on the lake, getting people on fish. Bass are super fun and keep rods bent and keep people laughing. So yeah, aggressive, big blow ups on the surface, hard hits. And sometimes, you drop into a cold front and they actually become really picky. So all those people that say bass are too easy, I challenge you to come out some days when there's a cold front. And
right. And be a guide, especially.
Be a guide,
I don't know what's going on.
Yesterday, I was out and we had a tough day. We the 2 weeks before it's been, lots of fish, 15, 20 bass in the river a day, some big ones. And yesterday we were grinding it out for like 5 small bites, and it was working for it.
What a change a day can make, huh?
Just get, I woke up in the morning, or that night I was going to bed and I saw the storm clouds rolling in and I was like, if tomorrow's bluebird, it's going to suck. And it was bright bluebird skies and you called it. It was just like, oh boy, there's the cold front bite. So slowed things down, got a few fish in the boat, but the big thing as a guide is, just keep people laughing, keep them having a good time, teach them some things, and they walk away and still have a great day. And you know what? Those people have already rebooked a few more trips, so they still had a great time.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So you're north of Toronto in, I think it's called Midland, right?
You got it. Yeah, Midland, Ontario, like Simcoe County region, just south of the famous Muskoka region, which is our cottage country area in Ontario. I live right on Georgian Bay. I launched my boat and, 2 minutes down the road, boat launch, and hit the bay for some big spring pike. Fall bite is really good as well for pike. We have a ton of different species here we target, all the warm water, and that's something that I'm really looking to grow my business and become more of a recognized warm water guide. So bass, pike, muskie. I have a huge carp fishery here, gar pike, bowfin. Like we've got a really cool fishery just in my hometown. But besides that, we're also super fortunate to have a fantastic lake run rainbow season, or steelhead, and resident trout as well, like great brown trout, brook trout, and rainbows. So we're right in the thick of it here in Ontario. If you haven't been up here, I recommend coming up for a few days and trying to hit a few different species, because, you come out in late June and you can, there's like 7 or 8 species you can target in just a couple of days. Ton of fun.
Oh, that's really cool. That's really cool.
Great area to live, to be a guide. Long seasons and lots of fish to fish for.
Right. And you work primarily on your own, but you do support one of the local fly shops. I can't remember.
Yeah. I'm a fully independent, fly fishing guide, but I have a great working relationship with a fly shop out of Toronto called Drift Outfitters. If you're ever in the area in Toronto and want to go to a real fly shop and just have some, great conversation with some great people that are, super welcoming, Drift is the place to go. And you can also reach out to them to get more contact info on me, or, there's the wicked shop. Can't say enough about them.
Nice. Now I know you mentioned bowfin. We had a guy, Drew Price, on the line. I mean, this he's a bowfin expert. He's probably one of the best in the world. If you want an introduction there, I'd gladly reach out to Joe. He's a great guy.
Sweet.
And for those of you guys that are interested in bowfin, a beautiful species and something that's, 1, picky, 2, when you hook one, it's like a dragon. They're wild. So very cool. Yeah. With regard to the pike, you had mentioned, spring fishing is pretty good. Fall fishing is pretty good. And my assumption is that it's a lot like muskie. Post-spawn, they're coming off of their spawn, so they're hungry. trying to fill their bellies. And then in the fall, it's pre-spawn. Like I'm heading into winter, I got to put the feed bag on. And those are the two most kind of known elements for it. There's probably some biological side to that too as well, I would think. But what is your perspective on that? And let's just talk about some pike fishing.
Yeah, I mean the spring bite for pike, it's kind of one of our first open water targets. We can, fish that we can target here in Ontario. Season opens pretty early, just after ice out. You get out there, the fish are, biologically they're trying to warm up and get in those shallow bays where whether it's a sandy bay or a muddy bay, somewhere where they can sunbathe a little bit. And that's really just because they're trying to digest food as a cold water, predator. The water's
turning over, right?
Yeah, water's already.
So that warm water's coming to the edge.
Exactly. Okay. And you got the sun just beating on the banks, and those muddy bottoms, sandy bottoms hold a lot of heat. And they're up there just sunbathing, trying to, metabolize their food. They have likely eaten something already out off the drop-offs and are just sitting there trying to work through it. Even though they're not actively chasing food up in the shallows, often they're fish. They either take it or leave it, that next meal. And if you place one right, you can get them to go easily. In the fall, the fishery is quite a bit different. They'll move up shallow again because pike, unlike muskie, are a bit of a cold water fish. They do prefer temperatures below 60 degrees Fahrenheit, ideally. Muskie, on the other hand, are kind of 60 and up. They don't mind getting up in the shallows and feeding heavy when the water's a little warmer. That's how, where I live on Georgian Bay, the two coexist fairly well. They're both native to the region, and one goes deep in the summer and the other one comes shallow in the summer. It makes a great fishery. There are lakes in our area that do have invasive northern pike that are decimating the muskie population just because there's no room for them to compete. So where we live, there's tons of room for them. In the fall, they'll often come up shallow, but as the lake starts to become a little bit less volatile in the thermal regions, it's more level all the way throughout the system. I'm sure there's a proper term for that, but
it's just turnover from what I understand, because there's like hypoline, tourmaline, et cetera. But you're right. Like in the summer month, it goes from like 4 degrees up to like 20 degrees or more.
Yeah.
But when the turnover is happening in fall and spring, it equalizes everything at around like 4 degrees.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's Celsius, sorry.
So, okay, I'm great talking Celsius. I like that too. Up here, it's funny, in Canada, we'll talk, as an angler, I'm talking Celsius air temp all the time. And the minute I look at my graph on my depth finder or whatever, it's all in Fahrenheit. So it's like I know water temps in Fahrenheit really well. I don't know air temps in Fahrenheit hardly at all. It's kind of funny. But we
really don't talk about lakes in the States. There's no Fahrenheit because according to us, there aren't any lakes, most people these days. We're starting to make that term.
It's funny. But in the fall, the pike are also following some migrations of other fish, because pike now aren't coming up shallow to spawn. They're coming up to rock piles and windblown shorelines where the whitefish and lake herring or cisco are starting to congregate to spawn. And they're trying to while their metabolism's still pretty high, just gorge. And you're going to get some of the best conditioned fish in the fall. They're big, they're fat, they're healthy, they're in their prime. They've
been sitting all summer at the bottom, just feeding on big
deep
stuff.
Water fish. I mean, we've caught pike, even down rigging for lake trout. They go deep. They're not afraid to go down 60, 70, 80 feet to stay cool. We don't target them at that depth, obviously, but they come back up into those fly ranges, like 15 feet and shallower once September rolls around, in through October, November. And then the winter, they still actively feed. Like probably one of the main fish I target when I do get out ice fishing is pike. Like it's a great fish to target through the ice as well. But then we roll right back into the spring.
When you're down rigging, I'm just curious more than anything, and you're fishing for Lakers and you hook a pike, can you tell the difference from that head shake?
Lakers are generally speaking, just a head shaky fish.
Yeah.
They're not like a running fish. Like if we hook a Chinook salmon or something out down there.
Yeah, then you know the difference. But they feel about the same?
They feel similar, especially a big pike. Okay. The problem with the pike is they just don't survive coming up. Their swim bladder expands from barotrauma, and they don't release. So they end up, trying to make the best of it. Hopefully they're a small one and they'll taste good.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Because the big ones get
You
mushy,
feel bad.
right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're just probably also not great to eat, right? Like full of heavy metals and all that kind of stuff.
Mercury machines.
Yeah, exactly.
They're like,
apex predator.
Kudas are the same way. Like Kuda tacos are delicious, but you're like, please get a small one. Please get a small one.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Hey,
I got nothing wrong with
low.
keeping small pike. They're a great fish to eat. Everyone talks about, catch and release and fly fishing. I fully support that, but there's a lot of pike out there, and you get a fish in the cold water that's under 30 inches, and they make great tacos.
Yeah.
Especially, if it's that 1 or 2 fish a day that just take the fly too deep, and there's no point just throwing it back.
Between Kuda tacos and pike cut tacos, we're all going to be Mad Hatters by the age we're 60 years old, whatever, I'll be back in diapers again for like the 5th time.
Awesome.
So very cool. So, you're doing a lot of spring and fall. You said summer, you kind of transition out of them because they're sitting so deep, et cetera. In the spring, maybe talk about how those tactics differentiate from what the winter tactics are and how you may approach the water differently from those areas in flies, et cetera. Let's give it like a whole well-rounded perspective there.
Yeah. So, the one cool thing about it is you've probably already got gear that'll be suited. As long as you got like an 8 to 10 weight rod, saltwater rods, they're easy, great to go for those. 8 weight's about as light as I'll go. The big thing with pike is in the spring, they're going to be shallow, but that doesn't mean floating lines only. So having a few different lines to fish different styles of flies. So traditionally when I'm guiding, I've got this 5, 10 weights and rigged up, ready to go with a couple floating lines, intermediate line, and a couple with like a triple density line down to like a sink 3, maybe sink 5. And that's more just like a prospecting rod and reel setup. You can cast a big air resistant fly, and even if it's a sink 5, you're not using it to get down super deep. It's just to pull the fly below the surface.
You're using the line to get down, not the fly.
Yeah, I'm not using weighted flies.
Huge in your casting.
Yeah, exactly. Much easier
to cast. And then the same thing, like you said, you're prospecting. So it might be shallow up on the bank, but you're not sure if the fish are there. So I'm going to pull it off the bank. Then I'm going to let it sink off the shoal.
Yeah.
And I'm going to pull it some more. And then I know there's a second shoal. And then I'm going to pull some more. And then, now I'm going to do my figure 8s, et cetera.
Yeah, exactly.
And then once you start getting regular bites, you might flip it to one that suits that area. Is that assumption correct?
You got it. Yeah, you definitely start off with, I have 2 clients in the boat. We're throwing different stuff. Maybe one person with a small fly on a floating line, with maybe some weight in it, like small dumbbell eyes, just to get a jiggy motion. And then maybe someone's throwing a sink line with like a bigger, 6 to 8 inch streamer, like the yard sail or something like that. That's got a lot of motion, walking bait that'll cover water. And then, do the math, who's getting more strikes, where are they getting the strikes on the retrieve, and then hopefully, build a pattern. I always say one's a fluke, right? Like one fish is just a fluke. Once you start getting into the 3, 4 range, that's like, okay, you're getting somewhere.
We got a pattern here. We got something to work with.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And off the lines, like, you just need the kind of specialized leaders. That's a big thing. I tile my own leaders. I don't buy store-bought pike leaders. They're really short and stout. Like I have they're 4 feet long total. I got 2 feet of 40-pound test nylon, and then a foot of 25-pound test nylon, and then a foot of bite wire. So 4 feet long, turns a heavy fly over really easy, allows the sinking lines to get the fly to the level and keep it there. It's not like it's floating up, right? The fly's above your sinking line, it's level. It's kind of like swinging
good contact to the fly too.
Yeah, you're direct. So when you strip into a fish, there's no slack. The fly does what it's supposed to do on every strip. And then besides that, we're going to start off likely searching for fish. The sight fishing component really comes into play when you've got high sun, low winds, kind of the perfect conditions. We don't always get that. And also in the right bays. Sometimes you're coming into a bay, and I'm going to start, when I'm looking at my charts or my GPS, whatever, I'm looking for bays that have kind of the same build and throughout the lake. So you want something that has access to deep water. You want something that has a few different ledges, like it's like, staging area for the fish, maybe a big rocky point that's coming out, going into a protected bay that eventually kind of comes down to hopefully a river mouth at the back of the bay is ideal. A little bit of current coming in attracts big fish
coming in and things. Yep. Okay.
they're majorly focused in the spring here on the white sucker and smelt. We have invasive smelt in Georgian Bay, and there's tons of them. And they're 6-inch long silver bait fish. The pike just love them. And you're looking for very specific weed structure. So the most important one that I like for fly fishing, for fishing for pike in general, is the cabbage weed. We jokingly call it the tobacco cabbage up here because it's like brown and broad-leafed. It looks like a tobacco plant. But it's like a very specific type of cabbage. And then the growth. We don't want it super dense. We don't want to be like picking weeds off our fly constantly. We want there to be, one plant every 8 to 10 feet. Like, we don't want it thick. We want room for those fish to get down, but also able to use their short bursts of speed to their advantage to catch the bait fish that we're looking for, that they're looking for. So the bottoms are generally silt, sand, muck, sediment of some sort in spring. And that's just going to warm up first and going to absorb the sun's rays, get the temps, in the main lake, we're seeing temps in the low to mid 40s, and then up into the back bays. It could be into the mid 50s, 60s. A good thing to do in the early stages is try to find the warmest water you can in the lake. In those first few weeks, try to find those temps in the, if the warmest water's, in the 60s, try and find that. Ultimately that will be too warm eventually, but in the early season,
just
that can
follow that metabolic temperature, that feeding temperature.
Exactly. You'll find out when you pull into a bay and you're fishing bays and they're in the 50s and you're getting a few bites, and all of a sudden you find one that's 58 and you're like, oh, that's a little warmer, and bang, 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 every fish is in there and active. And the great thing about pike is that it provides a lot of action. Where I live, it's nothing to catch 20 or 30 per person per day. There's some days that are slower. Your average fish with pike are around the 30 to 32 inch range, which for most people, that's a huge fish, right?
That's a huge fish, right? They're like, oh my gosh, I've never caught a fish this big.
And I'm there being like, oh, it's not big enough. I want those 40s. I want those, those big fish. But to most of my clients, that's the biggest fish they've ever caught. It might be the biggest fish they ever catch. So I always got to reset my expectations. They're
different looking. They're not like a salmonoid or a trout or where it looks like a beautiful kind of mountain fish,
Yeah, exactly.
They're like predators, right? Big teeth. They look like saltwater fish almost. They're long, snaky, and strong. And
and they're the way they attack a fly. Like I always say, my favorite species to actually guide for is pike, because when I'm standing up on the bow with a client and I get to watch the take happen, I'm just as excited as if that was on my rod. It's amazing.
The way they come up behind it, and all of a sudden they come out of nowhere.
Yeah, they kick one length of their tail, and the thing is that the whole body is like a tail. They're just long and lean, and they just make one kick, and they're accelerating. It'll close the gap 4 or 5 feet in the blink of an eye.
Yeah.
And often, you have to fish your fly right to the boat. You alluded to the figure 8. I don't do that every cast. Sometimes you get pike to go on a figure 8. I find they're not as happy to eat in a figure 8 like a muskie is. But what I always do is I fish my fly right to my leader, and then I'm going to do what's called just the L turn. So I get my fly to do left or right, just one turn, and make that fly change direction. And you're going to look for that flash where that fish also turns and creates a flash behind your fly.
You're looking a foot to 3-4 feet off, essentially, for any kind of color change.
Happen, exactly.
Then you slow down and continue your 8, right?
Yeah, I often will match the speed of the fish, and then go slightly faster. Try to play cat and mouse a little bit.
Okay, gotcha.
And if they turn on it and don't hit it in the L, they often, where I'm at, it's pretty clear water. Like we're seeing, bottom in 15 to 20 feet. So they see the boat pretty easy. I think they spook a little bit. Or if someone's really quick on their movement, they startle the fish and they take off. Just throw a short cast back in the general direction the fish went. Give it a 5-6 second count. Get the fly down and just start stripping again. And often you can connect again. Or the person in the back of the boat will just throw out and connect with that fish.
That is so wild.
It's wild.
The close proximity of pike and muskie attacks is quite similar but different, but it's all the same when they eat. It is
it's amazing,
ferocious. It's time sensitive and total unique skill set, and there's some luck involved. All those little things right in front of you, in a microsecond occur, and you're hooked up, and the guy's got the net in hand, and you're all going nuts. Did you just see that? And it doesn't matter if you land them. Because it's did you just see that? Oh my God, that was incredible. And it doesn't matter how many times you've seen it. If you've seen it 10 times, it's always, did you see that?
Yeah,
That's really cool.
there's a video on my Instagram channel you'll see from the pike that I guided this spring, the biggest one of the year, and I was filming the guy fighting the fish, and then I saw how big it was, and before pausing the video, I just threw my phone on the ground, and you can just hear the chaos. Right? It's like a video of the gray carpet in my boat, but and all of a sudden it's just like screaming going on in the boat, like, did that just happen? Like, it's exactly
That's
what you
awesome.
said.
That is awesome.
It's
Real
contagious,
quick,
and
you talked about the Georgian Bay.
Mm-hmm.
Could you talk about where that's at and what lake that's on?
Totally.
Because for us in the States, that's not a common Great Lake. A lot of people don't even know it exists. It's super funny, like west of the Mississippi. I bet you if you asked 10 people, 9.5 would be like, oh, that's a Great Lake. I have no idea.
Yeah. So I should mention it is Lake Huron, technically. It is one of the big five big Great Lakes. Georgian Bay is about a 1.5 million acre bay off of Lake Huron. So it's separated by the Bruce Peninsula in Ontario. If you look at a map of Ontario, there's this big long, to the west, there's a big long point, the peninsula that goes out, and it separates Lake Huron from Georgian Bay. Where I do most of my guiding would be a separate area off of that, even add more complication, is called Severin Sound, and it's just a sound off of the bay. And it's a huge area. It's full of the billion-dollar cottages and whatnot, but it has just fantastic proximity to the big city, an hour and a half from Toronto. And big fish, and it's diverse fishery, everything you could ever want.
Yeah, and it has a pretty, if I recall, it has a pretty large, like flat shoals area around the edge, but it leads into a very deep 80, 90 plus foot zone.
Yeah, I mean, so we're fishing, the topography in my region is very shallow and warm, like the deepest parts you're seeing, though. Even I should even mention, like, the watercolor is different in my area of Georgian Bay than the rest of Georgian Bay and Lake Huron, because it's so shallow and fertile. It is like a tannin colored water. Like it's still clear, but it's like tannin colored. But if you drive 20 minutes out into the bay, it's crystal clear, and like 40 feet of water, you're seeing bottom, just because of all the rivers that are coming in and adding nutrients to the water, which is why the fishing is also great there. And the numbers of fish is great. But yeah, once you get out, into main Georgian Bay, I would say past the area called like Christian Island, or Giant's Tomb Island, in that region, you're going to see depths in the neighborhood of 200-300 feet.
Wow.
It gets real deep. And then as you get over towards like the western side, joining into Lake Huron, it gets even deeper and clearer and colder. Tobermory is kind of at the point of the peninsula that I'm talking about. And even in the middle of summer there, the water is very rarely above like upper 50s. Like it's cold, cold water. But where we're at right now, I was out 2 days ago, and the water temp's in the mid 70s right now. So it's like you can jump in and take a bath if you want.
Right, and it's too warm.
It's too warm for pike.
Too warm for cold water fishing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are you targeting in the warm months? Are there warm water fish that migrate into there?
Yeah, so the smallmouth is, the famous. It's becoming the other brown fish in fly fishing now, right? Like everyone's fallen in love with it. There's guide services now that really just guide for bass. Like it's amazing. I would have thought that when I started fly fishing like 20 years ago. Like, people are focusing just on bass.
And it's amazing. 20 years ago, people were like, what are you wasting your time for? Like,
exactly.
That's easy.
It's not a brown trout.
You may as well be throwing crankbaits. You're like,
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. It's super fun.
Yeah, it's super fun. We're catching a lot of fish. Yeah, so we really focus heavily on bass in the warm months. Again, we get shots at carp regularly on the flats. I go to an area where the water's a little clearer and very shallow. And we're using the same boat I run. I don't have a skiff, although I'm looking to bring a skiff up. That might be my next investment. Be one of the only skiffs in Ontario, I think. Yeah. But poling around for carp, gar, and then bowfin. But like you mentioned, predominantly we're fishing smallmouth right now. And bass doesn't open here. Like we actually have a season on bass. It doesn't open until the fourth Saturday in June. So any bass you catch before that is supposed to be incidental. You're not allowed to target them.
Gotcha.
And just to allow them to spawn, catching bass on beds can be pretty easy. And it's just
irritate them.
Yeah, they're just defending them. They're not eating, right? So they're in the middle of defending their nest from the round goby and crayfish and all those other things. So because of that, we try to leave them alone. If we catch if I catch an incidental bass, it's not the end of the world. We don't take it out of the water. I use barbless hooks for pike. We just pop them off, away they go. But every, second they're away from the nest is potential for, something to eat their eggs. And and we have a trophy bass fishery. Like the one area I guide where we have numbers fisheries, just like I have in Pike. There's lakes I can go to where you get numbers for anglers that just want to catch fish. And then there's lakes you go to where you just want to catch a big one. And we have a trophy bass fishery here where we're averaging fish. Like this spring, for the first 3 weeks, we didn't catch fish under 17 inches. Like they were all huge smallies, and the biggest one being just under 23 inches. So like that one we weighed out at just under 7 pounds. And for Canada, that's a massive bass. It's not Florida largemouth, but like that's a huge bass. And they're all sight fish. So that's what I'm doing right now. But the pike fishing is a great way to actually even introduce people to fly fishing because it's action packed. Like I was saying, the average day is 20 to 30 fish struck. What like I like to say to people and set expectations right with clients always is you're going to have a bunch of opportunities. It's up to you to capitalize on them. Right? If you hook them, that's great. If you lose them, that's okay too. It's not the end of the world. But as you gain experience and you stop trout setting on fish, you're going to get more results. You're going to put more fish in the net. Pike take a fly incredibly well. I mentioned I use barbless flies, and it's not for like really our protection. It is for fish protection. They come up, and the way a pike will eat a fly is they just open their mouth, and that vacuum just sucks the fly back. And because there's no weight to them, like if you're using traditional gear, like weighted crankbaits or spinnerbaits, whatever, bucktails, like there's weight to that and resistance, and it's not going to go so far back. But with a fly, it's gone. And most of the time it's hooked, back in the mouth, in the roof of the mouth, sometimes around a gill, right? And with you also want to make sure you have the right release tools. That's also key. So I have 2 sets of release tools in my boat, one at the front, one in the back, and that includes long nose needle nose pliers, pair of bolt cutters just to cut hooks, and then I have jaw spreaders, and then at the front and back I also have measuring devices because everyone wants to know how big their pike is. So and we measure them in the water. Like I have
you usually skip like 4 to 6 inches in the middle of that measure, right?
Always, and maybe bump their head slightly back as they're looking at the tail.
It says 34, 44, we're good.
44, done. But yeah, we try to take care of them. I want to make sure most of them swim away because they do take flies deep. So you have to be cognizant of that.
You mentioned 2 things I want to jump back to. One is the vacuum effect when they eat. I think that's really important, especially with regard to pike. Bass are like that too. And a lot 100%. Of times what they do is they eat with that vacuum, but they're also eating on a like an introduction to change, right? And that introduction to change often occurs when your fly stops and turns and rotates, or your fly stops and the nose dips, etc. So all of a sudden you have this stripping mechanism that you're doing manually with your hand, and your fly is reacting. So your flies go, boom, they stop, change direction. The fish opens its mouth, vacuums. You have a little slack in the line. They suck it in real deep, and boom, you got your hook set because now you're tight again on your next strip. And then they strip, to get them real tight, and that gives you that deep set. So that's, I think, one thing that's important to notice and talk about. And then the other thing is, I'd like to talk about your stripping technique. Do you have guys tuck their arm and double hand strip like a tarpon strip, or do you single hand strip? What do you look for in your line? I know when I'm stripping for trout, I'm always trying to keep my line tight. I'm varying my strips throughout the day until I find something that's good. Maybe I might have a couple follows, but no eats. Well, if I have that, then I'm going to change my strip. Maybe put a longer pause, or strip pause, or strip pause, kind of thing.
Got it.
Let's talk through some of that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, with pike, as any predator, they really do want the fly moving, I find. Like, there's no point to really let it just pause for too long. Introducing small pauses in between your strip, just in the motion of, like, your regular strip is key, but not purposely giving it a strip and then giving it, like, a 3 or 4 second count. It's, like,
so not to really stop the fly, let it change levels, or make it appear dead. It's more of a working aspect of your strip, just to give the fly action.
Exactly. Keep the fly moving. And when I build flies, I use flies like I mentioned before, the Yard Sail by Matt Grajewski. He ties an awesome fly called the Yard Sail that instinctively, when you pause it, it's going to go left. It's going to go right. It's the Yard Sail because it's all over the place, right? Awesome fly. Or like Bufords, tied smaller, like the musky fly, but tied smaller. all those flies have action built into them. So when you do strip, it's going to push water and then it's going to stop. And when it stops, it's going to rotate. And that's huge. It just will flash to the fish, showing that it's injured or something. So when I'm just covering water, it's about, I always tell people it's from your hand to your hip. That's your strip, like a nice 1.5, 2 foot strip. Keep that fly moving. Let the fish tell you what you want. If you see one following it, instinctively people want to slow it down and try to feed the fish. That's not what happens. The best thing you can do is do an accelerated like stutter strip. So it's kind of like a fast-paced
right.
Like a couple quick kicks and a long strip.
I learned this lesson, Matt, with a guy who taught me how to fish for sharks. And he said, look, they're top predators. Bait fish don't pause and wait and look and go, hey, I'm over here. Exactly. They run like crazy. Yeah. He's like, if you're stripping a fly and it's coming straight to the nose of the fish, he's like, it's already over. They know it's not real. No fish comes to my face. I'm always going away. So same kind of scenario. We do that with big fish and trout too. If you're casting, a lot of times you'll cast straight out and maybe a little man, but not a huge man, so that the fish is actually running downstream. Because a bait fish is going to turn, use the current and fly versus try and run up river against the current, and a big fish is just going to eat them. So
you got it.
A lot of those same techniques, I think, are applicable. Is that fair to
Yeah,
say?
Definitely. 100%. Yeah. Like you mentioned, they're predators. They want to eat a moving target. They're designed to eat that moving target. Now, most of the time, when you interact with what I like to call happy fish, is you don't see the fish. It just hits it out of nowhere. It's not following. It's not looking. Like I've heard people try to say, isn't it amazing how pike and muskie like to follow a fly or a lure to see if it's fake, right? And I don't think they have the conscious, or they're smart enough to even realize that things are fake. But I think what they're really looking for is signs of that it's alive, that it's real, just a sign that it's like a real target, not that it's fake. Like, just let me see that it's alive. So like the great thing about flies, and anybody fly fishes versus conventional, you'll know this, is they move on the paws too. So it looks like there's a little bit of motion. Like if you look at a fish sitting still, the fins are always twitching. There's like, micro adjustments in their dorsal fin or their tail fin, just slightly moving. So when I strip let's use the yard sail again as an example, the hackle, the hackle tail is going to kind of just constantly flow a little bit, right? You strip, it goes left, and then it just kind of sinks and it kind of rotates and flows. And it just gives it that little extra added realism that you can't replicate with like a soft plastic jerkbait. Not saying those don't work, but I think there's something about a fly itself. But yeah, like it moving. But that does change depending on the mood of the fish and how you're targeting them. So if we're fishing bigger flies, like in the spring, we're fishing flies 6-7 inches, not huge. In the fall, we're fishing flies 8 to 10 inches, a little bigger, because bigger food at the end of the year, fish have grown. That's what we're trying to copy. But when we're sight fishing, specifically to big pike in some of the other lakes I guide in the Muskoka region, those fish are completely different, and there's not a high density of fish. So you don't go out expecting to catch 20 fish in a day. You go out expecting to see 15 and hopefully getting 2 or 3 a bite and hopefully putting 1 or 2 in the net. But we're basically the same thing you would do on a flats. Like I have a polling platform on my boat, but I jump right up on the front next to my trolling motor. I put the motor on pretty high, and we just cruise the bays, and we're looking for fish. Like we might sometimes make only 100 casts in a day, versus when you're fan casting and covering water, the water is so clear on these lakes and there's such a low density of fish. It's better to just go find them. So they're going to be laid up in 2 feet of water or less, and just look for things that look like logs. They do look different. They are a little darker color or different color, and they don't have sediment on them. That's the number one thing. If you see a log, something that's got sediment on it, you're like, well, it's not a pike. But if it's a clean looking log, it's probably a fish. And what we'll do there is we're not going to throw big flies at them, because that startles them potentially. So we're going to use flies that will represent like leeches, for instance. An easy meal that's like a potato chip that lands in their face, and I just got to eat it, right? And we're going to cast those flies
and things like that.
Yeah, but bigger, right? So like my favorite it's actually like a tarpon fly, the whistler, right? Like bead chain, schlappen, like bucktail, but tied to be about 4 or 5 inches long.
Cockroach, whatever, You
got it, exactly. But in black is really key. And bead chain eyes, just to get it down. In fact, the biggest fish of this year, which was just under 45 inches, was like, I was yelling at the guy like I've had tarpon guides yell at me, where it's like, bump, 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 pause, let it die, kill it, speed it up, and like we were able to get the fish to eat eventually. But you're placing those flies beyond the fish, just like any, sight fishing scenario with bonefish and they're coming at you. Pike, are sitting still. So you have a target that's sitting there and not cruising generally.
Right.
You're going to cast that beyond them. And ideally, you've identified which end is the head. And you're casting at the head of the fish, which is very key, because a lot of people cast just at the fish, not thinking about where their fly is going to land, and it comes by the tail, and it might even bump the tail, and that just spooks the fish. We don't want to line the fish, so I don't like casting completely perpendicular. I like to cast at them on like a 45-degree angle with the fly kind of coming across their snout, and usually about 6 inches in front of their face. I'll let those whistlers or like a bunny strip leech with lead eyes or something just sink to the bottom, let it get right down. And I'll usually use a floating line, maybe an intermediate line, just to get it below surface a little bit. And we will strip that fly until it's about 3 feet away from the fish. Originally, the fly is landing about 10, 15 feet beyond the fish. That way we don't spook it. Strip it into about 3 feet, let it hit the bottom. And then it is just the tarpon bump. It's just tap, 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 letting that fly just hop along the bottom.
Zoom, zoom, zoom.
And, exactly. And we're going to watch the body language on that fish. Do the fish that's sitting still, do the fins all of a sudden start twitching? Does the dorsal fin, which is located really far in the back of the fish, turn? You'll see that fin rotate. And that's how they get their directional energy. They rotate that dorsal fin and then they attack. If you see that, you're doing something right. You're going to keep going those slow strips. Sometimes you're going to see these fish follow it for long distances, 20, 30 feet. They'll be right on the tail of the fly. Generally speaking, what you can do in that sense, because the water's cold, is just kill the fly. Just let it sit there. And it'll sit right in front of their face, and you'll see that fish go right down, nose down on it, hovering around it, looking. And maybe all it's going to take is the tiniest little fast bump. And what's going to happen is out of nowhere, the fly just disappears. It's gone, right? But a lot of the time they don't, and you get this big fish we caught, this 45 was followed 6 times, I think, all the way to the boat, kept coming back. And we changed flies constantly, new fly, because once they engaged on it, they know it's not something they want to eat. So you got to throw something different colors,
it's just like size, a tarpon. It's so funny.
Weight, same idea. And I got it all on video, which is so incredible. But it's literally just like, and the fish, when it did eat, it ate right at the boat. Like the leader was in the rod tip. So it's clear water. That fish did not care that the boat was there. Yeah. It's big. It's just like I'm the apex. And when it ate, you got to resist. A lot of time you're casting and you're strip setting. And this is where it gets a little complicated. Once you're at your leader and the fly's at the boat, your best set is a straight up in the air trout set. Try to hook him hard, lift hard, put pressure on him, and keep that pressure on.
Pull your butt end back.
Yeah, exactly. You want to load. It's like tarpon fishing where you don't want to like bend the rod. You want to like pull on the fish. Like
you want to have the
you're not pulling
tight,
hard enough.
Direct connection.
Yeah. Exactly. So you're going to pull back and lift, and you're going to hopefully move that fish's head quite a ways, and then really trust your knots, trust your gear. The weakest point in my system's 25-pound test, so pretty heavy. And on a 10 or a 9 weight, like you can put a lot of pressure. Most people can't pull 20 pounds, right? You tell them to pull 20 pounds, and they think they are, and they're putting a couple pounds of pressure on the fish.
It's like 4 to 8, maybe.
Exactly. So pull as hard as you can. I don't like to give them much line. I like to give them enough line and a low angle on the rod to let them not get their head out of the water and shake the hook.
Yes.
Keep their head underwater and let them have enough line and give in the rod, like push with your rod versus letting the line slip through your fingers. Don't try to put them on the reel. I always say, let fish put you on the reel. Don't try to do it because you're going to drop fish. You're going to sit there spinning your reel and then it's going to run at you and it's game over. And then
unless you're really seasoned, that is very difficult. People don't understand.
It is very difficult. Yeah. If you can smack the reel and just get it to pick it up quick, then that's great. But if you're there trying to wind it up and that fish makes one movement towards you, it's game over. Hopefully you're fishing with a friend or a guide that can then jump on the net and get that fish in quick. The thing about pike and any predator like muskie or pike, freshwater, is with the gear we're using, they're not sustained fights. They're quick. Unless the fish eats out from the boat where, a cast distance, 50, 60 feet, you're going to have a bit of a time, a couple minutes. But if they eat at the boat, generally they're in the net in 30 seconds. Like it's quick. And that's for fish health too. Like I want to get them in. I want to, make sure they're fresh. And they, as an apex predator, they do get lactic acid buildup. And then they're prone to be getting hit by osprey or boats or anything like that. So we want to, just like any big fish, land them as quick as possible. And then, have a big net. I should mention that. Like, have something that you can like stand up in. Like my toddler, he always is like climbing in my net and asking me to lift him. Like it's like a big net. It's like 40 inches across. Yeah, it's like 36 inches wide. Like it's huge. And I'm putting maybe a 34-inch fish in that. It seems ridiculous, but from the aspect of being able to let the fish stay in the net and breathe, and like take the hook out, leave it in the net, get ready, teach them how to hold the fish.
Right.
Hold the fish out over the water so if they drop it, it falls back in the net, all that kind of stuff. It's really important because there's a few of these pike that I catch, especially on these these lakes where there's just big fish. We catch them multiple times in a season, right? You see a lot of them with hook wounds. So if you take care of them, they'll take care of you. That's really important.
And the big nets, it's critical too, especially when you have bigger fish, because you see this a lot with your kings and stuff that run out of the lakes. But people will net them. They'll net them tail first, or they'll net them, and the fish is so big, they just put their tail down and press, straighten up.
Yeah.
And it flings them out of the net if it's not deep enough. Yeah. Because they're all head. So that's having a big net is critical, especially in pike and muskie fishing. And
you did mention something there is make sure you're netting them head first.
Yeah.
I say that all the time. If I'm out with a friend and I'm fishing, I'll be like yelling at them, like head first. Like, even though I know they know, it's like in the moment of panic and you think the fish is laying there calm and the head's away from the boat, they think they can just get them. One kick of their tail and they take, 10-foot run, no problem.
Right.
So it's better to let the fish come to you, slip them in the net. They're going to roll like crazy in the net.
They're going to see the net
up and hog tied.
They're going to feel the water, whatever. And it's you're hitting it right on the head, Matt. And that is, fish swim forwards. They do not swim backwards.
No, exactly. At least at speed.
Right. Hello. So it makes sense, but for some reason, you're like, oh, he's not going to see me. I'm just going to sneak up behind him. And they feel that movement of water. And like you said, it's 8 feet and they're gone.
Yeah, this is the biggest fish, the biggest pike we put in the net this year. In the video, if you watch it, you'll see I botched the net job the first time. We had it on a long time, and I was worried about, like, on a small hook, like we were using a whistler on like a size 1/0 hook, and this fly's only 4 inches long, and I'm like, I don't know how long that hook's going to hold. And he had it on the line for a couple minutes, and it gave me an opportunity. And it was an opportunity, but I had to reach. Like, I was belly on the gunnel, and I had the net fully extended. And it took off. And in the video, you hear me just saying, sorry, yep, that was a bad call. Like, sorry, still got him. Like, okay.
Yeah.
And then, I calmed myself down because it was like such a big fish. It was the biggest pike of my guiding career. I spent 3 summers guiding on Lake of the Woods out of Kenora, in Northern Ontario. Like, I caught big pike, but a 45 was a big pike. And we got it in the net after the second attempt. And that was the only one that I botched this year, I'll tell you. I'm lucky we got it in the net. But, the other thing with the barbless hooks is you get them in the net and they're usually out. You put the rod down and it's like, oh, the fly's already out. Cool.
Yeah.
Like, it shows you that pressure is key. Like, just keep them tight. You're not likely going to break them off. Even a 10, 15 pound fish, like a 30 inches to 36 inches, not going to break off 25 pound test usually.
Yeah.
They just shake their head a lot, but
right.
And then it's all over.
Yeah.
The excitement.
You touched on two things I want to jump back to because I think they're really important. And then we're going to jump into this sight fishing thing and wrap up the show.
Yeah.
One is the strip setting.
Mm-hmm.
When you were casting and you're stripping back, one of the things I found really helpful in saltwater fishing, and I apply this to muskie and pike myself, is I extend my arms out in front of me. Because you had mentioned my strip is from my rod to my hip. If my rod or my arm is bent and it's halfway to my hip or it's close to my hip, that strip is only 3-4 inches. Yeah. And a lot of times that's just the slack in the line. And then if I go to strip set, I'm only getting another 2 inches or so, maybe 3 inches of set. Whereas if my arm is extended, I'm stripping back towards my hip, not into my hip, towards the side of my hip. And then if I feel that hit, I got another 3-4 inches of like extension to really set. And my line is tight now. I didn't just take the slack out of the line. Is that similar in your nature?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, you got it exactly. Push that arm forward. I should also mention, we catch quite a few of them that you always want to take a look at your hook points too, just sharpen them quickly in between fish sometimes, because that can make a big difference. But yeah, no, extend your arm. If I'm a right-handed caster, my right arm is going to be forward, probably 8-10 inches further away from my body than where I would comfortably hold it. Get used to that. And then, you're going to strip right to your hip. And you, like you said, you have that ability to go beyond your hip at that point. You're not stripping into your leg, you're stripping to the side. And, ideally, hopefully coiling the line up fairly neat for your next cast.
Yeah.
One big thing too is touch on, beyond the strip set and just stripping line is managing your line. A lot of people that I take out fishing, it's potentially the first time they fly fish out of a boat, and they have only had experience in a river where the current's kind of managing your line, is drifting downstream. And the number one thing I see is people stepping on their line. And they go to cast, and they're getting in their head, and they're just like shorting themselves their distance. And, if you're new to this game, you're a trout angler with a 5-6 weight, you're probably going to limit yourself to a 25, 30 foot cast with a pike fly. It's going to take a while to get you up there. But then if you're stepping on the line, you're now only 15 feet, and you need to be able to cast 50 feet roughly to be able to cover enough water. So what I do a lot of time is we just fish in stocking feet, fish in your socks. You can feel the line that way. I have stripping mats in the boat that'll help kind of coil the line a little bit for you. But it's also great when you hook a fish that wants to take line, you're standing on the line.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's that nice long strip. What is the there'll be plenty of times where I see someone didn't get a good strip set and they've got a fish on. They just kind of poked the fish. The point just hit the bone in the fish's mouth, and I'll yell at them to set again and set again. Like give a couple more strip sets. Like give it a like hooking a big tarpon, right? Like hit them once, hit them again, hit them again, hit them again. Okay, now let them go. Same kind of idea. There's a lot of similarities. Or you wait
until that head turns. Head is turned. Now I'm going to hold the line tight, and I'm going to dip my tip, get my line straight, and set, and then start to release slow to keep tension, but use the bend in the rod. But that straight line gives you that direct connection to really get a good set. Now I feel like I'm set. Now I'm going to fight the fish.
And then beyond that is just keep the tension, like load up your rod, use it like it's supposed to be. Fly rods with big fish are not meant to be held overhead. You'll high stick them, you'll bring them to the surface. People are like, oh, it's jumping. And I'm like, you're literally lifting it out of the water. It's not a jumping fish. You're telling it to go up.
Yeah.
Side pressure and beyond, like lower, like if you're in a boat, you're on an elevated platform. So my rod is not parallel to the water. It's actually tipped down into the water a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Trying to keep that angle down to keep that fish wanting to pull away and stay underwater.
That's a perfect segue. Perfect segue. And I was going to say the second thing for me was controlling the fish with the angle of your rod. And you just mentioned it. It's like, look, a tarpon or a pike or even a trout. When you see that fish jumping, that's because that's the direction that you are pulling them.
Exactly.
So like you said, if I hook a fish close to the boat in the leader, I'm going to let it run enough to get the leader out of the eyelets, and I'm going to immediately turn my rod and dip my rod tip into the water. What's that going to do? That is going to pull the fish down into the column, keep that head from shaking out of the water, which you had mentioned is like the number one way to lose a fish.
Thing.
Right? I'm going to keep the tension on, and I might slowly let a little bit out, but I'm going to keep it tight, and then the guy's going to be on the net. I'm going to be ready to land the fish. And then when the netter says, okay, lift the head, boom, I'm going to turn it, lift the head, guide the head to the net, boom, get in there. Now, it's really easy to say on a podcast.
Oh, totally. And it all happens in about 5 seconds.
Yes, or less. And it feels like a microsecond in your head.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of that is that preparation stuff that we talked about. And I mean, just like the line management, we have a great tip online that talks about line management. And I learned that from trout fishing on the Arkansas from a guy, Mark. And he told me, look, you keep snagging the line on your foot and putting the auto brake on, and you're fishing in February. It's cold. You got rubber boots on. Your hands are icy, etc. And it's really hard. And he said, look, when you start stripping back, you need to manage where the line is going, where your feet are going to be for your next cast. And he's like, you do not move. You set a repetition for yourself. Okay, fly landed. I'm going to start strip. My line is going to go here. My feet are set for the next cast. When I see the fly or I see the transition to the next cast, I make that transition. He's like, it has to be exact the same time. If you change it every other time or every 5 times, he's like, you're going to continue to step on your line. You're going to put your auto brake on, and that's going to be your opportunity. Because we're talking about a fish that you cast to 50, 60 times, and you may never see it.
No, exactly. Yeah. You want to have your best foot forward, so to speak. Like make every cast count. And we're all human. We're going to make errors, and try not to let that get in your head either. Like, step on your line, but then learn from it. Right. Big thing.
Well, Matt, that's been awesome.
I should also mention when it comes to pressure real quick is a lot of people want to lean back on the rod. Even if they're putting side pressure, they're putting a big C into the rod, where I want more of like, kind of like a less pronounced J, like
Yes.
really tight, keep them tight, keep that rod in the direction the boat's going, but the rod tip loaded up. Like try not to, because there's no power once you're behind your shoulder. Like try to keep it. Yeah, big thing.
The thing I always tell people to do when they catch a bigger fish and they're trying to put more pressure on them is don't look at the tip of your rod for the pressure. Instead, look at your first and second eyelet. If you start to see bend there in the first and second eyelet, you know that you're loading your rod correctly. And therefore, the rest of your rod, the tip, the first 3-4 section eyelets, they will flutter. They will bounce like a spring absorption, which they're designed to do.
Exactly.
So that's a great point. I really like that.
Yeah.
Let's jump into the last section here. We're going to wrap up, Matt. That's the sight fishing aspect. Like I said, you do a lot of bass fishing. You described the Georgian Bay, great area to do the sight fishing, etc. But there's also pike fishing that's sight fishing. You have trout fishing up there that's sight fishing. You have kings and all kinds of runs that's sight fishing. But then people go to the flats or they go trout fishing. There's always sight fishing. And for me, it's one of the best and most rewarding factors. Regardless of the style of fishing I'm doing, but being able to see a fish feed, whether it's side to side movement or coming up or, it's running down crabs or whatever, but being able to see that fish go from a live feeding scenario to, aha, I duped you or I tricked you and you just ate my fly. That for me is like complete 100% confirmation that I got you versus I got you, but it could have been luck. I don't know.
Totally. I think that's where, almost like what fly fishing was designed to do. Right? Compared to like conventional recovering water. And I'm a conventional angler too, and I'll take conventional anglers out and we just cover water, pound the banks and all that kind of stuff.
It's like sustenance fishing component, right? I mean, I'm trying to get fish in the boat, so I can feed my family.
Sight fishing, I see them. You're going to make your right cast. You're going to watch them engage on the fly. You're going to read the body language. You're going to see them eat. You're going to resist setting the hook too early. And then you're going to hopefully hook them up and keep them tight and get them in the net. Like no matter what species you're targeting, there's a lot of commonalities between it.
Yeah. For me, that's the ultimate reward is like,
definitely.
You've built this repertoire of moods and then all of a sudden you are asked in a moment's choice to implore them, to act on them, put them all together in the right sequence. And then you get the visual aspect of seeing it. It's like the finest art of carpentry, taking a raw piece of log and turning it into a beautiful, box or something that is like, aha, I just went from that to that, like it worked. Everything I knew worked.
Exactly.
So talk about that a little bit, Matt.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, we already covered a lot of it, but that's the thrill, right? Everyone wants to see the fish before they cast to it, and it's great. And if we can do that for you, it'll make for a good day. You really want to do a few things. Big thing I like to tell people is a lot of people when they're sight fishing with me, they want to fan cast as well, and they just want to fish. They want to make casts, and don't cast. Just we're purposely looking for a fish. Because what's going to happen is, sure, you might pick up a fish that we didn't see, but you're probably more likely going to see a fish and your fly's already out there 30 feet. And if anybody's sight fished before, they realize you only have 4 or 5 seconds to make a shot. And by the time you strip in, that fish is already caught on to us being there. The angles change, the wind's blowing us off a little bit, and it's game over. So
I can't stop the boat. All those scenarios come into play. Okay.
Hold the fly in your hand, carry about, I don't know, a rod length or a rod and a half length of line outside your tip. So you have something to load the rod up on your back cast.
Right.
You really only have time you really only have time for one false cast, maybe 2. Get comfortable in your city park, learning to shoot 40, 50 feet with one back cast. Being comfortable letting those lines, nowadays the lines are...
Let's stop.
Sorry.
Let's stop. I'm going to interrupt you.
Yeah,
that is probably the most important practice session. Is when you're sight fishing, learning how to put, like you said, 30 to 40 feet of additional line out in your back cast. The other scenario is the exact same thing, but in reverse. You have to make a back cast. So you're releasing 30 to 40 feet in your forward cast, but your cast direction is actually in your back cast. Those two elements of being able to let go of that 30, 40 feet, you just went from a 12-foot cast to a 50, 55-foot cast in one stroke.
Yeah.
Now, when you first start, it's very difficult to do that for 20 feet.
Mm-hmm.
But after one session,
Mm-hmm.
you'll be able to make a 50-foot cast in both directions.
Totally.
Now, you'll go back to second session. You'll practice again. You'll be able to do 25, 30 feet in your first cast. You'll be able to do 55, 60 feet. You'll probably end up stopping around 80 feet or so. That's going to be your max for a little bit. And then you're going to have to work on your technique and your style and your timing and all those things to be right in that session, regardless if you're an 8 to 12 foot or 12 weight line or rod.
Mm-hmm.
But I fully agree with you, Matt. Being able to let out 20 to 30 feet in your one back cast like scenario, whether it's forward or backwards, is going to be the biggest game changer for your casting with regard to sight fishing.
You got it. Yeah, let that line slip. Like throw in a little haul, let that line slip, pinch your line again, come forward stroke with a little haul. And hopefully at this point, we've already identified head and tail. Place your fly beyond the fish and in front of the fish. You don't really want your fly to swim at the fish, but, bring it so it's quartering across the fish. Like it's like, it accidentally swam over him, kind of the idea with pike or bass in general. So you make your cast, you might have, depending on depth of water, you might have to give it a little bit of time to sink. If you're using full sink lines, you're using floating lines, it all depends on water depth. You're really going to watch, I touched on it briefly, but watch the fish. Often, there might be more than one. Try not to let your eyes glue on that one target because you might be staring at, in bass, for instance, they tend to school up. And word might be thrown at a bass. People see like, oh, I see one, okay. They see a 17-incher, like a nice fish. But if they don't just look with their peripherals, they might miss a shot at like that 20-incher, that big fish that's right nearby. So you're going to always use your peripherals when casting. Try not to stare at your hands when you're getting a little bit more experience casting. Like just use your body, learn what it feels like to load the rod, what the line slipping through your hand feels like, when to stop it without looking at it in your left hand with your fly line, and when to come forward. I'm never, when you're learning, you're looking at your cast forward and back, trying to like watch your loop, but get to the point in a park, in your backyard, where you kind of can
practice with your eyes closed.
Practice your eyes closed. Yeah, exactly. It's a huge thing. And yeah, feel that, get the fly out to the fish. Don't surprise the fish. Don't hit them on the head. That's a big thing. Even for species like bass that are apparently easy to catch, you will spook them. Generally, crayfish don't come flying from the sky. They're usually just crawling along the bottom. So they will spook. But place that cast beyond them. Bring it to them. I should also mention, when you're in a park practicing, like you should practice with a fly. Like take a hook point off. Like don't just cast a piece of yarn. Like that weighted dumbbell eye Clouser minnow you're throwing is going to cast completely different than a chunky yarn. It's going to have different action on your leader. So practice, cut the hook off one and just cast that, or a piece of split shot or something. Just try to like get the weight down.
And you nailed it too. When you're practicing in a park, use the same fly that you're going to try and use while you're fishing, same line, et cetera, and then just take the fly, take a pair of really nice nippers or whatever crap ones. I don't care what it is, but cut the tip of the hook off. That's it. You just don't want to hurt somebody or get snagged up on the ground or whatever.
Tree or grass. And then it really, there is a little bit of luck involved with it too. You want to, show the fish your fly. You want it to kind of creep into view. You don't want it to surprise them. So that fly should go beyond, and you're stripping it in. Watch the body language on that fish. Does it flash its fins? Does it twitch? Does it start to accelerate towards your fly? Always, generally speaking, go slightly faster than the fish is if you're fishing a bait fish fly. So the fish is swimming at it nice and quick, strip a little quicker. If you're fishing a crayfish fly, you're just going to keep your action. You hop it along the bottom, because crayfish don't usually swim away too fast. They might skitter and then stop and claws go up. So there's going to be pauses involved. Same thing with like, a sculpin. If you're fishing in a river for trout and you're streamer fishing to a fish, sculpins dart and then stop and then dart and then stop. They don't just constantly keep going, or they turn down the current and swim away. Exactly. They don't have a swim bladder, so they're always on the bottom, right? So throwing those stalls, depending on what you're fishing. So if the sculpin, a goby, a crayfish, all those things stay on the bottom. Bait fish flies, like if you're throwing a game changer that's supposed to look like a small perch or something, like it's going to swim pretty quick. So just keep it moving, right? And then at that point, you're using your peripherals while the fish is following it. Keep an eye out for other fish. Hopefully the fish eats. If it does eat, try to strip set if it's out from the boat the best you can. Hook that fish, keep pressure on. And then number one, if it's a pike or a bass, they're not going to take line. Just keep stripping. if we're doing fish, like, or for fishing for fish like carp, for instance, hook them, be prepared for a slow run. I always joke with carp, it's not usually like hooking a bonefish in an F1 car. It's kind of like hooking a dump truck going up a hill stuck in a gear. Like, it's constant pressure and it's a good long run.
And
but
if you try and stop it, it's very hard to
snap.
do.
You're gonna break them off. So those fish, be prepared to have your line cleared, hold the triangle, hand away from your reel, just let the line slip through your fingers, let them go. With bass and pike, keep stripping, get them tight, show them who's boss, direct them to the net.
It's so funny you say that about carp. I just want to step back because a bonefish, it's like an F1, but their mouth and lips, they look somewhat like a carp when you first see them.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
But they're very, there's a lot more structure there and a lot more density, etc. Whereas in a carp, slow but powerful. It's like being in your 4 low on your truck.
Yeah.
But their lips are very soft and gentle. And if you try and stop them, you'll rip their lip off.
Exactly. Yeah. And I always joke with carp is they've got a very hookable mouth. Once they eat your fly, even when they try to expel the fly, generally speaking, they get hooked.
Right.
If you got a sharp hook, because they realize it's fake and they spit it and they take off. And then that's when a lot of people realize, oh, I actually fed it. Great.
Right.
But try not to stop them. Like, take your time. There's plenty of videos out there, but most carp bites are in the neighborhood of 5 minutes, 10 or longer, depending on the size of the fish. Like, they're a sustained fight. It's not like a steelhead or a bonefish, which rips line and then it's over, fairly quick. But carp will just keep going. They'll surprise you. So let them run, let them put you on the reel, and then fight them on the reel. What else? With
nowhere to land them, right?
Nowhere to land them in a boat, or if you're wet wading. Like, we actually have flats here where you can wade 2 feet of water fishing for carp. It's limestone bottom. It's beautiful. You look down, it almost looks like turtle grass on the bottom of the ocean. Like, if you take a look at some of my photos, it looks like the Bahamas where we're fishing for bass and carp. You have nowhere to land them. So, for instance, a bass, well, they're lippable. Everyone's seen someone lip a bass. You can stick your hand in there, lip them. And if they're under, 4 or 5 pounds, it's a pretty good shot at that. Carp, on the other hand, like, there's no way you can tail a carp effectively. They have, the tail just disappears, like it folds flat and it's gone. So I always carry an oversized net, but a short handle, like a wading net for steelhead. Like, pretty big hoop though. Like, it might be 25, 26 inches long. Like, you can get the fish in there with a deep basket. Deep basket to get them in. So that's huge because they don't really, I've hand landed them before, and it's usually the best way to do it. If I forget my net with a client or whatever, it's hand under the belly, underneath the pectoral fins, like let the pectoral fins slip between your thumb and your finger and kind of lift them, and then get a hand on the tail and you can kind of control them.
All those things as an angler trying to net fish by yourself come into play.
Yeah,
totally. It's a good thing, like on a day where you're like, I'm fishing a small river. I know I'm going to fish small fish. I'm not really worried about it. Like, don't take a net. Just go have fun holding fish, man. It's fishing.
Exactly. Yeah. And then with pike, you do want to get comfortable learning how to handle them correctly because they've got pretty good teeth on them, just like muskie. So not being afraid of them, if you learn how to do it properly, it's totally safe. I like to, if I'm going to hand land them, I do like to control them by the tail quite a bit, or I'll usually pinch them right behind the gill from the top. Like, I'll grab them on their shoulders instead of going straight for the gill plate, because you got to get them to roll onto their belly and then they kind of go crazy. But if you grab them behind the shoulders, they're in the right orientation for them not to want to right themselves right away. Like, fish will freak out the minute they sometimes go sideways. So you can grab them with your dominant hand, put a hand on the tail, and then get your hand underneath and lift them up.
Yeah.
Again,
and you mentioned that's really good too, because if you can get them behind their gill plate, on the top of their back,
if they're small enough, you can do it.
There's like a soft section in there on their spine, right by their gill, above their gill plate, that you can grab, and you can kind of get you can actually get a pretty decent grip.
Oh yeah.
And then once you get the tail allows you to rotate them, and then you can allow your hand to slip off and get under the gill plate. Now the key is, Matt, and we're not going to have time to talk about it today, but do your research. When you get your hand under the gill plate, it's under the gill plate. It's not under the gill.
Not the gills.
It's under the gill plate. But learning how to handle those fish, there's lots of YouTube videos, etc.
Yeah.
There's one guy that's a pike guy that's He does a lot of talking about it, but if you look on
Okay.
YouTube, there's some really good information. And
Hmm.
yeah, so Matt, gosh, man, you just unloaded a wealth of information. You have a
Oh,
great
God.
fishery up there. I'm excited to get up
Yeah,
there and fish with you.
definitely. Let's do
Um,
it.
let's do this again. We're going to talk
Yeah,
about some of the
100%.
other seasons, some of the other species you have. But for sure, Matt, thanks for being on the show, man. Again, you want to
Oh,
get a hold of Matt, Smooth River Guiding Company.
yep,
You said
yep.
is the company that
Is
you
the name of
work
the
with?
company. Yeah, so it's my company. It can be reached at, the website if you want to check it out. It's just smoothriver.ca, not .com, .ca.
Okay.
And on Instagram, I'm really active there. I mean, who isn't right now trying
Yeah.
to, show their catches off. So smooth period river period guiding will get you there. Follow along. I'm giving away a lot of tips and stuff. I'm showing leader formulas and stuff on Instagram Reels. I'm doing lots of live tying demos as the winter approaches. There's a wealth of information just if you follow along and watch my stories. Most
Yeah.
days I'm giving away stuff, not just showing off fish.
Right.
How can I make you a better angler? So,
Right. And that's how,
yeah,
I believe that's how we met. And I remember
totally.
like just reaching out and we just started chit chatting. And
That's it.
it's like you're like me. Hey, if you're an angler, we live in the same house, man. It's an
Exactly.
open door
We
policy.
can all
so-
relate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Feel free to ask questions. I'm not someone that's going to be like, I'll book a day first. Like,
Yeah.
hit me up. If you're coming to the area and you're like, I don't have time for a guide trip, but you point me in the right direction of some like well-known spots, great, no problem.
Sure.
Let's do it. And let me know how you do so that I can maybe put a little more info in my bank.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Matt.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks again.
Cool.
Thanks everybody for listening. We'll be back next week. We're going to get somebody else on, but for this week, we had some pike, we had some spot fishing. It's great to hear from you in Toronto, Matt. We'll talk to you guys soon.